Ah, the Sturmtiger. Yes, a lot of ink has been spilled over these. It's an impressive feat of experimental engineering. Surely this could turn the tide of the war if... oh, what's that little line? Oh, that's the number they built. 18. They built 18 of these. Well, that's not going to do a lot, is it? It's not even the width of the letter S. All right, but let's pick something a bit more... the Jagdtiger. Oh, yes, now this surely is a German superweapon that could turn the tide of the war. It had a 128mm gun that could knock out anything the Allies had. Its frontal armour was so thick it was almost impervious to attack. And they built 85 of these. 85. Now, World War II was very big. A very big war indeed, and I think over the many hundreds, well, thousands of miles of front, east and west, 85's not really going to go very far. Okay, the Elephant. They made more of that. 90. Yeah, that's still not very many. Okay, what we want is some proper tank that went into full production, and we need hundreds of them. The King Tiger. Yes, the Königstiger, the Royal Tiger, the Tiger II. Yes, they made 490 of these. That's more like it. With 490, you could have several big units of these working together, protecting each other, going forwards, and then, even after sustaining some losses, they would still have enough to carry on the fight. Yes, with 490, you could really do something. Hang on, 400. Surely with a war this big, we need to be talking in at least thousands, don't we? Okay, the Tiger. Oh yes, okay, the classic German tank. They made 1,347 of these. That's more like it. That's a few times the width of the name, although admittedly having a shorter name helps. Yes, now with numbers like that, Allied troops on, well, wherever they were, could be in genuine fear of having some reasonable risk of encountering a Tiger so it could strike terror into all. Yes, 1,347. Just think what you could do with a force of that size. So what were they up against? Well, the main tank fielded by the Americans was, of course, the Sherman. And so how many of those did they make? Yes, they made really quite a lot of Shermans. That line there represents 7,000 Shermans. That's a lot of Shermans. Only the Americans actually made more than 7,000 Shermans. They actually made 49,234. Now, some people will say that, but it took 4 or 5 Shermans to knock out one Tiger. Well, even if that rather dubious statement were true, when you take into account the fact that half the Tigers were lost to mechanical breakdowns, and then of the rest, the most common way of knocking them out was either a mine or an anti-tank gun, and then, of course, infantry-held weapons like PIATs and bazookas and close assault took out a lot, and many of the rest were shot at from the sky with rockets or had bombs dropped on them from the sky. So the number of tank-on-tank actions that the Americans had to fight against Tigers was not really that big. And even at 4 to 5 Shermans per Tiger, the Americans could very, very easily afford that. But the Sherman was not actually the most common tank of World War II. No, that honour goes to the Russian T-34. The Russians built 64,549 T-34s. When it comes to tank production, the Germans just were not in the same league as the Allies.
Here we have a T-34-85. What does the T stand for? Tank, which is the Russian word for tank. What does the 34 stand for? Well, in theory, this was when it was designed. And 85 is the caliber of the gun. So this fired an 85mm diameter shell up that pipe. This was a later version of the T-34-76. And why was the T-34-70? You've guessed, haven't you? It's a 76mm gun, but otherwise very similar. The turret on this, you can see, actually overhangs the hull a little bit. This turret was not designed to go onto this hull. This is a later upgunned version, and they had to make a bigger turret to get a bigger gun in. They also thought it was a good idea to have another crewman in the turret. The crudeness of this tank is just funny. I mean, the crudeness of the casting here, it's just so lumpy and bumpy. The quality of the metal is not the greatest, and some of the welds are hilariously bad, and they don't, when something sticks out, they don't bother filing it off and making it look nice. What the hell, paint over it. They thought to themselves, well, a tank's going to last maybe, 3 months in action, so why make it so well crafted that it'll last for 70 years? No, it's going to blow up in 3 months, so make it good enough to just about last 3 months, and then it'll have done its job. One way of looking at it is it's like a hand grenade. It's a disposable item that you use them up. Now, the hull is a bit short, and this turret is very far forward. So you can see it actually does overhang the front a little bit, and there's a bit of a bodged solution there with a extra bar of metal added on. This means that you can't put hatches. If you're looking at a British tank, there will be an escape hatch here, and a guy, when things go wrong, will be able to leap out of that. But where do the ground crew? The only place they can get out is out of this. So there's a hatch in the front armour, which is not a terribly good idea. You have to put a hole in the front armour of your tank. And you can see these flip up for little vision ports. If you're this guy, you have to wait for this guy to get out before you can get over and climb out the front of the tank. And if your tank's just been knocked out by the enemy, probably from the front, you might not want to get out of the front of the tank, but there you go. Sometimes needs must. You've got a bit of a spare track here added on the front. It was popular to put things here because it adds to the armour. I'm now around the back of the T-34, this much loved and admired design of tank that the Russians built in World War II. And I just want to show you how bad it was in so many ways. You wouldn't want to stand where I am, for instance, if this revved up, because look, the exhaust pipes just go straight onto me. I don't like that. Look at the quality of the craftsmanship. Look at this just gap. They haven't welded it. There's a gap between the side plate and the back plate. And these bolt holes, you see, don't all have bolts in. But what the hell, that's enough to hold it on. Just shove it out the factory, it'll be fine. And even today, so lovingly looked after by the people here at the Tank Museum at Bovington. You see it's dripping oil onto the deck, black. I've seen almost no oil dripping onto the ground from many tanks, but this one does. But another thing I want to show you is something very odd about the suspension. If you come around here, I shouldn't say suspension, I should say the wheels. Right, I talked about sprocket wheels, but this has no sprocket wheel. You see, this is smooth. And yet, this is the driven wheel. This is what causes the tank to go forwards. You see, it's got pins through here, here, and here. And the tracks have these enormous, great protuberances in their centres, and you can see one there sitting between these two pins and there between these two pins. So this is an alternative to the sprocket wheel design. Why didn't this catch on? Why didn't everybody use this? I don't know. Now, something that I have known for most of my life is that this was a Christie suspension. Christie being an American tank designer who, after World War I, tried to sell his designs to the American government, but the American government was not interested. America did not need tanks. America was not a tank-producing nation. But he made a few prototypes, sold some to the Russians, and the Russians had a look at them and thought, oh, that's good. And rather than buying a load of his tanks, which is what he wanted, they just nicked the ideas and used them on their own. Anyway, I was always led to believe that these road wheels here, with their thick rubber rims, were attached to the engine, were powered by the engine, and that they are what drove the tank along, and that so that you could take the tracks off, and then this could, at least in theory, run on the roads. Now, it didn't actually happen very much, largely because Russia in the 1940s had almost no roads, and certainly almost none where the battles were happening. But apparently, I have just had the scales lifted from my eyes. Apparently, the rear wheel here is what actually drove the track, and though this was influenced by the Christie suspension, it can run without its tracks idea was on earlier other Russian tanks. Now, there is another interesting thing about this. You can see these pins. You see these pins? These are the pins that hold the track together. But there's nothing holding the pins in. They don't have a big rivet head or a bolt. On almost all the other tanks here, there's a bolt which you have to unscrew. But you just have to knock that out. It's very, very quick and easy to knock one of those out. Unfortunately, there's nothing to stop it working loose. So how come when you run around the countryside, these don't just shake apart and everything fall apart? Well, it's because of this ingenious but extremely primitive thing here. Can you see there's a scrape mark that's gone through to the raw metal through the paint? This is just a lump of metal that's sticking proud of the side of the tank, and it sticks out so much that the heads of all the pins hit it as they go past. So that knocks the pin, which has got a mushroom end on a head on that end, it knocks it back in. So these tracks were constantly falling apart and constantly being knocked back together again by this very primitive process. And it's also why these tanks, when they moved along, had quite a distinctive metallic clanky noise, which is all these pins hitting that thing as they went past. It's primitive, but it got the job done. One of the things that people like about this tank is the sloping front armour. If you add slope to armour, it makes it more effective. Almost all threats from another tank came at a fairly flat trajectory. So a shell has been fired from somewhere around the front, and it comes at it at that sort of angle, so it's much more likely to zing off. And simply the amount of metal it has to travel through, even if it does bite in and travel through the armour in a straight line, the amount of armour it has to push through, get out of the way, simply because this is sloping, is a lot greater. Of course, if you slope the side armour, which is what they've done here as well, the American Sherman had a vertical side, but here we've got a sloping side armour. Not only does this cut into the amount of space you've got to work with inside the tank, but so does that. These were very cramped inside. They're something of an ergonomic nightmare. They were primitive, but here's the thing. They worked, and they made these in huge quantities. They shipped a lot of their tank manufacturing capacity east to a city that became known as Tankograd, and they made these in huge quantities, in stark contrast with the Panther. Now, this is the German answer to that. It's a very similar tank. It's a similar size. It has a similar size of gun. It's also good in that it's a good mixture of fairly good armor, fairly good gun, and a fairly good mobility capability. It's got wide tracks. They're like that wide, and good ground pressure. That is to say, low ground pressure. So it's spreading its weight very well. So this is a good quality tank, and its basic stats of armor, gun, mobility are quite similar to that tank over there. And some people just froth about this because this is German, and they go on about how it's a really good-looking tank. Well, you don't win wars by having good-looking tanks, and you don't necessarily win a war either by having a tank that's super high-tech and just that little bit better than the other guy, because it took them something like 6 months to make one of these. I mean, obviously they didn't make one and then start on the next. They were making many in parallel, but from beginning to end, it could take something like 6 months to make one of these. The Americans, meanwhile, their average rate of Sherman tank production in World War II was one every half an hour, and the Russians were achieving something similar with their T-34s. If you need to win a war, don't design something that takes absolutely ages to make, is super high-tech and brilliantly well crafted and made to last 70 years. No, get lots and lots of things that work and churn them out. Get them to the front line where they're needed. And if some of them get knocked out, well, never mind. You've got loads and loads of spare ones to replace them. These were so precious to the Germans. If one of these got damaged, they went to huge effort to recover it. And loads of men would have to risk their lives going forwards into enemy-held territory, perhaps, and hook up towing cables to it and pull it back out, and then can it be repaired? No. For the Allies, life was much simpler. If the Allies lost a tank, they just went and got a brand new one out of the depot. And the Shermans that were sent over as Lend-Lease to the Americans, to the Russians, were quite popular with the Russians because, it's got sloping armor like our tanks. This tank was a shock to the Germans. When they launched Operation Barbarossa, they'd been told that these primitive Russians would have nothing that can stop our mighty panzers. But in fact, they had T-34s, which were decently fast, decently armored, and decently gunned. They weren't brilliant in any of those three, but they were pretty good in all three of those, the three main stats, if you like, of a tank.
Here we see one of the external fuel tanks that the Russians went in for. Pros and cons, as you might imagine. Various handles and loops for attaching stuff to the outside, some not very confidence-inspiring welds, and the shot trap under the mantlet. And now the people who are paying for this video. Yes, it's my sponsor, World of Tanks, and you can see there a Russian tank, how very appropriate. It's a KV, and at the bottom of the screen, my rather extensive garage. Yes, you see, I have a lot of tanks. Well, I've been playing this game rather a lot. Anyway, I think a KV is possibly a little bit... I know, let's use a BT, because a BT7, that actually has a Christie suspension, and I was talking about that a short while ago. Right, that's the thing. So I click battle, and off we go. Get to listen now to some quite nice orchestral music, and it loads up the game, and 3, 2, 1... All right, it's usually a slightly longer count-in than just 3 seconds, but I don't want to bore you in an advert. And we're off, and here I am in this amazing 3D world. Look at the detail. These maps are very nicely designed. Oh, did you see it cut me off there? You see, there you go, that Excelsior, much more polite. So here I am, hurtling up the street, and better watch out for that lamppost. And bang, got it. And I wouldn't do that. That was an accident. I wouldn't do that again, because that would be wrong. And here comes another one. Bang, got it as well. Right. Now, as I turn right here, those buildings on the left, those are the edge of the world. You can see some little red cross-hatching there. That marks the edge of the world. They are constantly tweaking this game. For instance, this gap I'm about to go through here, that didn't used to exist, but they're always finding ways to make the maps a little more interesting or a little fairer. Anyway, look at the view over the town from up here. Isn't that amazing? And much of that, what you can see down there, is actually on the map. Now, the red little mark, that's a report from one of my colleagues of a tank that's just out of my sight. Now, BT wouldn't actually have a radio, but never mind. Let's just imagine that I've got a radio. I got off a shot. Well, I got off another one. And quick. Yes, I got away before he fired back. That's pretty good. Lots of red dots coming. Oh, where did he come from? Ow! Ow! Yay, got him back, but even so, ow. Right, I better come back here. Oh, he missed me. Where did he come from? I'm dead. Well, never mind. Anyway, it's a PC game, as in personal computer, and you can download this all for free. Okay, I'm now in a Matilda, and I'm now cruising through Redshire. This is another one of the maps, and it's meant to be England. Coming up to a bush here, and it goes transparent when you get close to it, showing that it's acting as cover. Oh, he thinks he's hiding, but I bounced off. Never mind, I can never get. Hey, got him, damaged him slightly. Oh, and someone else finished him off. Right, another thing you can do is do capture the flag stuff. So here I'm going into this white circle, and you can see, bing, there you go, the counter started. I'm capturing the enemy's flag. Uh-oh, there's someone hiding behind that house. Okay, hit him, did a bit of damage. And, okay, his gun was a lot bigger than mine. Never mind, I'm in the Cromwell now, and look at the reflections off those puddles. That is beautiful. I mean, that is just glorious. It's an enemy now, and ricochet, damn it. Possibly his armour is a little bit better than my gun. He's blundered into my sights again. Okay, this time. Okay, looks like I've met someone I can't really handle, but never mind. Two of my heavier compatriots have come along. They made very, very short work of him, didn't they? Okay, now I go scouting ahead, bravely, you understand. And, okay, here I come to the... I've been seen. That's what that little light bulb means. There's a guy up there. And, I hurt him very slightly. And, well, it doesn't always go my own way. Okay, now I'm a bishop. I'm a mobile artillery piece, and I'm hiding in this bush, and I've got within range. Okay, I'm skipping out all the reloading. Obviously, I don't get to fire on full auto, but you can see I'm trying to drop my shells from above onto reports, onto coordinates given me by my spotters. Sometimes I hit, sometimes I fail, and yay, got one! And this is a map based on an actual place in Russia where there was actually a real tank battle. He's hiding behind... the shell hit the rock. I've been seen. That's what that little light bulb means. I've been hit! Okay, I better move. Well. Now, I'm a looks and... Look, there's a T-34. I just thought I'd show you that, and... I'm dead. If you are registering for a new account with the game and you use the link in the description of this video and the code TANKMANIA, then, in addition to the normal starting kit, you will get an Excelsior. That's a Tier 5 tank, 250,000 credits, 7 days or a week, it's your choice, access to the premium version of the game, and 30 free battles, 10 each with the Tiger, a Cromwell, and a T-34, 3 very popular tanks. Now I'm a Panzer III, and I'm dead again. Okay, now I'm a Super Shaffy, and isn't this another beautiful map? And I've seen a target there, but it's mostly hidden, and that's frustrating. Now, I'll take these, I'm dead. Well, anyway, you get the general idea. You're probably going to turn out to be better at this game than I am. Now, I know some people are going to say, you've been unfair with German war production figures. I mean, you've deliberately not picked the most common German tanks. Okay. Well, here we go then. By far the most common German tank was the Panzer IV, and they made this many of them. I think my point still stands. The first T-34s were ready to be issued in September 1940, just 8 months before the Germans were to betray their Russian allies by invading the Soviet Union. The first mass production involved many parts made in Kharkiv in eastern Ukraine and final assembly in the tractor factory in Stalingrad. That factory got surrounded by the Germans and, famously, tanks were crewed in the factory and driven out unpainted and straight into battle. Why paint something that's likely to be a flaming wreck in half an hour? Here you see the interior of a T-34-85, but so much has been stripped out, and I'm using such a wide-angle lens that this does not get across how cramped it was in there. In the first 2 years of production, so many corners were cut that the cost per tank was halved. Many improvements were suggested to deal with its many problems, but the only ones that got official approval were those that made manufacture cheaper or quicker. Rain leaked in, disabling electrical equipment and even spoiling the ammunition. There was no turret basket, which made life very difficult for the loader because his feet didn't move around with the turret as it turned, and he would be trying to load a shell into a moving breech, and if it barged him out of the way as it turned, he might get caught on the exposed teeth of the turret gears, and those caused horrendous injuries. Famously, the drivers used to carry a hammer or mallet to help changing gear. Yes, it was that bad.
I wonder if you can tell me what this is. Can you? Oh, great. Well, I'll tell you. It's a pistol port. That's just a little plug of steel, and from the inside that could be pushed out, and it had a little chain and a little thing to stop it falling out completely, and it was just a hole in the turret out of which you could shoot a pistol. So if you thought that there was some enemy climbing on your tank trying to attach some mine to the side of your vehicle, or doing something that would disappoint you like that, you could have a go at shooting him. Good luck, but of course it's incredibly unlikely to know that he's there. But maybe you got some warning when you saw him through a little slit up there.
So how well did the T-34s fare against the Germans? Well, the early T-34s did very well in two respects. The 3-inch gun, yes, that's right, I said a 3-inch gun. You may think it had a 76.2mm gun, but did you know that 76.2mm is exactly 3 inches? And no, that's not just a coincidence. You may think you live in a metric world, but you're wrong. Anyway, it was powerful enough to rip through all the puny Panzer Is and IIs and IIIs and 38Ts that the Germans were using in Operation Barbarossa, and the armour on the T-34 was almost proof against the standard German 37mm anti-tank gun of the day. So, in those two respects, they were fearsome machines. But in other respects, they were really not great. They were not reliable, and they were very difficult to fight from. The crews were often rather undertrained. They had a 2-man turret with very poor optics, and the commander had no cupola. So he was half blind and was trying to work the gun as well as command his tank. And he almost never had a radio, so he was reduced to waving flags or just hoping for the best. And it is reckoned that the German crews were getting off 3 rounds for every 1 fired from a T-34. The later T-34-85 did have a 3-man turret and a commander's cupola, and usually even a radio, but they didn't start production until early 1944, by which time the tide of the war had already turned. An awful lot of them have ended up as war memorials. T-34s stayed in service long after World War II. They were used in the Korean War, where they proved embarrassingly impervious to the USA's bazookas of the time, until the Americans did something which they should have done many years earlier, which was build a bigger bazooka. According to Wikipedia, in 2010, 130 T-34s were still in service in places like Cuba, Vietnam, Yemen, and North Korea. The Angolan Civil War involved the use of them in the 1980s. But do not think that the T-34 was the most common type of tank ever. It was the most common in World War II, but the most common type ever was its successor, the T-55. But that is for another video.
The